Hey everyone, so welcome to the first Mindful Monday. Woo! So I've been wanting to do this for a while now, and I'm really excited that we get to start doing this at the beginning of the year. So these videos aren't going to be super long, but the intention of these videos is so that way you can experience what mindfulness is, learn a little bit about what that is, to feel like you have more control, more joy, more happiness in your life, and to also learn some of the practices that I like to use, and perhaps you can start looking into it more. So before we do anything, the first thing I'd like, and also at the end, if you guys have any questions, please just type them in. If you're watching this live, I'll try to answer them live. And if you decide to watch this after the recording, then go right ahead and ask away then, and I will answer them for you. But the first thing I really wanted to share was the reason why I decided to start my practice in mindfulness. And actually, I didn't even realize I was starting a mindfulness practice. It started about, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago already, and that was I started it through yoga practice, and I didn't even realize that was really a mindfulness practice in and of itself. And from there, I've started my own sitting meditation practices, and then something called, I guess we can call it trait mindfulness, where we bring this more into our everyday lives through the way we walk and the people that we speak to, the way we eat, and all things like that. And what it's done for me, actually, because of this practice, if many of you might know, I used to have terrible anxiety, and I still have anxiety from time to time, but it is nowhere near where it used to be. My arm used to go numb. I used to crawl in a ball. I used to not be able to move. That's how bad my anxiety used to be. And because of mindfulness practices, it's really allowed me to give myself this space to experience what I need to experience. And one of the other things too is it's not just really helpful in just emotional distress, but it also really helps when you go through some sort of physical experience. So for many of you, you guys know that last year I had a major operation. I had emergency surgery, and it took me about 2.5 or 3 months to really fully physically recover. There was still a lot of emotional distress after that, I feel like, for me, but during the healing process, without my mindfulness practice, I don't think I would have recovered as quickly as I did without the practice itself. So what is this whole thing that we keep hearing mindfulness? It's been in Time magazine. We might hear it at a yoga studio. We might hear it from our friends. We might hear it in a meditation class, whatever that is. What is mindfulness? Well, there's a few ways you can describe it. The first thing I'd like to say is that when it comes to the science of mindfulness, it's really interesting because mindfulness in and of itself is so internal. It really is a first-person experience. So what's really wonderful now is that modern science, right? And it's only been about the last 30 years, and most people would say that Jon Kabat-Zinn is the first person to really bring this into the forefront in science and to make this really like a defined thing, especially in modern culture. Now, before we get into that, which is kind of where a lot of us come into it, where we learn a lot about this, the other side is these ancient practices that we've heard of before, like in Buddhism and in yoga, and even Taoism. And so we look at, and there's plenty more mindfulness practices, but that's kind of the majority of what we think of most of the time. And so when we look at these ancient practices, and they've been cultivated for 5,000 years, this is really old things that go back really far back, and they've constantly been changing over time. And the idea of it is actually, in Buddhism, the word is sati, or the Pali texts we can call them, and it doesn't really mean being mindful. Mindfulness kind of was the rough translation of English of what this really means. And sati is really about remembering, and not remembering this, but remembering, bringing our whole selves back together, finding ourselves being whole and complete, and to be okay with whatever experiences we are experiencing. So whether that's pain or joy or gratitude or sadness. how can we look at this whole thing? So what I'd like to share with you today is actually what Jon Kabat-Zinn explained as mindfulness. And mindfulness, according to what we would call it in modern times, especially looking at it from a more, we can say, scientific perspective, is mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way. And that's on purpose, in the present, and non-judgmentally. And I think that last part is really where a lot of us get really tripped up. And we start judging ourselves. And now a big part of the mindfulness practice is to bring that awareness around the judgment, right? Now, that is the big part of the practice. And I think also a lot of times what happens is when we're thinking about mindfulness is that we have to clear our heads, we have to be these perfect Buddhist Zen monks sitting on top of a mountain, or maybe we're a ninja and we're disciplined and we're so good at like just sitting down and getting ourselves super centered and we can take on the world, right? But what's so wonderful is that mindfulness is such an individualized practice. It is so different for each and every one of us because each of us is experiencing something different in this time and in this body. So I'm really excited because the first thing we're going to do today before we take Q&A, and this is what we're going to do every week, okay? I'm really excited about this. Yay! Is that I'm going to talk a little bit about mindfulness, teach you something. I'd love for you guys to participate with me, and then take some Q&A right after. And that's also such a great start to the week, right? Why not start a week where we feel refreshed, we feel really aware of what's going on, and just creating a very different experience instead of being blinded and trying to push through everything we're going through, right? To be really present with what we're experiencing. So let's get into the practice. This is one of my favorites. A lot of times before I start my own mindfulness practice, or even when I'm working with children, a lot of times I will work with this. And if you're watching this and you're not able to really sit and do the practice, that's fine. Maybe just listen and you can integrate this later or come back to this later. That's fine. So these are called tingshas. And oh, look, there's like a little bug. Hello, bug. So these are called tingshas. And these are bells that oftentimes Buddhist monks will meditate with. Now, you don't have to use something like this. You can use a glass bowl. But what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to ring this bell. And I'd love for you to just take a moment, if you can, wherever you are. Hopefully you're not driving. Hopefully you're able to sit and listen. But just close your eyes. I'm going to play these bells. So first I'm going to demonstrate the sound. Here we go. And so what I'd love for you to do, and what I invite you to do, is close your eyes. And when I ring these tingshas, to see how long you can focus your attention on the sound of these bells. But before we do that, I'd love for you to check in with yourself, your physical body. First, notice, are you holding any areas of tension in your body? So close your eyes, and starting from the top of your head, move all the way down. And just notice, are you feeling any tension anywhere, or are you feeling like you have a hard time letting go in one part of your body? And whatever happens, that's fine. Notice the thoughts moving through your head. Just notice them like you're watching clouds across the sky. Notice the quality of your thoughts. Are they excited? Are they stressed? Are they confused? Just notice. Just label it thought and let it go. And then notice the emotions you might be feeling right now. Maybe it's joy, gratitude, excitement, sadness, stress, anxiety, depression, the blues, love, Whatever it might be, just notice it and notice what that feels like in your body. So we'll do this for about 3 times with the bells. I'll come back to the sound of my voice. I'm going to ring these bells 3 times and see how long you can focus your attention on the sound of the bells and see if you can hear it all the way to the end. And if your mind wanders, that's fine. Simply bring it back to the sound of the bell. Take a deep breath in. Now, if you were able to hear the bells or to follow it, even if it wasn't all the way to the end, but you were able to follow it, just press the like or love button so I know that I can get a gauge, because it's sometimes a little strange to be here on the other side. So just click like if you're able to follow along. Wonderful. And you might hear my cat. So if you hear anything, that's what you're hearing. Beautiful. I love it. Okay. And if you didn't, that's fine. Before we do it again, now that you listen and you were able to follow the bells, can you just check in with yourself for a moment and notice if anything has changed in your body? Maybe you're more stressed, or maybe you feel more relaxed, or maybe there's been a shift in your thoughts or your emotions. And if you do feel like sharing and you feel called to share, just type in. That's fine. So one more time. Again, notice how you're feeling, the thoughts that you're feeling, where it might be hard for you to let go physically in the muscles in your body, or your jaw, or your eyes, right? Your toes. Just be aware of where you are exactly at this moment. Let go of any judgment. Even though that sounds easy, I know it's not. But I ask you to let it go. I invite you to do that. And now one more time, just notice where you are now and see again if you can follow the sound of the bell all the way through to the end. If you felt like there was any kind of shift, you can open your eyes now. If you felt any difference in your body, just press like or love or anything like that. If you feel like you didn't, you can press the angry face or the button. I just love to get a sense of where everyone is with that. Okay, beautiful. So before we close out today, I'd love to hear any feedback, any questions you might have about mindfulness or about that practice, or to share a little bit about your experience in listening to the tingshas and just focusing your attention with that. You can just type it in the comments below. Anyone? Well, if you guys do have any questions about mindfulness practice and that practice, or you'd like some tips about how to start your own, I'll be doing something every week. And I can also answer any of your questions. So type them below or private message me. And I hope that you enjoyed Mindful Monday number 1, but more importantly, that you're able to go into the rest of your day and to feel that, oh, we do have one thing. One thing I noticed was that it was difficult to let go in the core area. Any suggestions for that? Great question. Okay. So if you feel like you have difficulty letting go, the best thing to ask yourself, or to just experience really, is to just notice what it feels like to not let go. So the idea behind mindfulness is not to force anything to change, right? We can't force something to happen. The idea of mindfulness is to be really aware of the experience we're having in the moment. So if you notice that you're feeling a little bit tight or you're having a hard time letting go, first just notice, what does that feel like not to be able to let go? What sensations are you feeling in your core? Do you feel like it's pressure? Do you feel tingling? Do you feel nausea? What sorts of thoughts are coming up? Why can't I let this go? What's wrong with me? And just really be with that experience. And if you feel like you have a hard time coming back to it, the best thing to do is to notice the breath, is just to come back to your breathing and just notice what it feels like to breathe. So the more you're able to continually practice coming back to the present, using the breath to anchor you into the present, the easier it will be to really be fully with the experience of having maybe a tight core or stressed shoulders or really uncomfortable thoughts or feelings. I know that may feel a little bit frustrating because you really want to get rid of this uncomfortable, frustrated feeling. I know I actually had an anxiety attack at the beginning of the week last week, and I remember feeling like, why can't I let this go? But then I remembered, what does it actually feel like to experience this anxiety attack? Does that mean, like, what does it feel like in my body? And the more I was able to feel the experience of it and to breathe through it and to be really accepting of what's been happening in that moment and to just be aware, the easier it was for me to move through that experience. So that was a really awesome question. I'm really happy you asked that. I really hope that helped. Before we go, does anyone have any more questions that they'd like to share or ask, or anything they'd like to share about their experience with the Tingshas? Okay. Well, if that is it, thank you so much for joining me on our first Mindful Monday. And if you have any questions, that would also be really, after the video is over, you can always message me. That would be really helpful in me being able to help you in experiencing mindfulness. So have a wonderful Monday. Enjoy the rest of your week and have a mindful Monday. Goodbye, everyone.